right, welcome to today's episode of Tomorrow's Leader, where we dive deep on all things leader related to leading other people, leading yourself. And one of the great things about this show is the feedback I get from different people listening to it. And to my, I guess, surprise, this has really appealed to a really large audience, a lot of different types of people, from corporate leaders and business leaders to organizational leaders, and also parents. I've gotten a lot of feedback from parents who say, you know what, this leadership stuff really relates to being a parent. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. It is, right? Anytime we're trying to influence or guide people, that's leadership. And as a parent, and I certainly know as well, that you got a whole bunch of different challenges with trying to lead or guide the people that we have, we are trusted to guide our kids. We want them to be in a great place. So I figured, who better to have on than somebody who is an absolute expert and pro in this and can answer all of our questions. And I am really, really thrilled to have Dr. Lori Fishman on joining us today. She is an attending psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital. She's a clinical instructor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and she is an expert on child and adolescent mental health and parenting skills. So, Lori, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So I've got so many things I want to ask you. This could be a 3-4 hour show. So I'm going to try and get to some of the things that I know are questions that people have. Let me ask you this. I know one of the big things that parents deal with is we want our kids to have a lot of self-esteem, a lot of confidence. I know every parent probably deals with that at some point in trying to help their kids have more self-esteem. You almost wish you could push a button and make it happen. What's your advice as parents? How do we do that? How can we help our kids with that?
I think there's little ways each day that you can actually push towards your kids having more confidence. One of the things we often do as parents, and many times when I tell stories about parenting, I talk about my own experiences, but many times when we see our kids doing something wrong, we're very quick to point that out. Like, you didn't clean your room, you didn't brush your teeth, you didn't do your homework. Constant, all day, we are nagging, we are complaining, we're saying that they didn't do something. Very often what we forget to do is praise them for something they did do. We just expect them to do it. They did it. Good, you did what I said. So for example, if your child puts a dish in the sink and you didn't have to ask, even though it seems like you shouldn't have to say this, going out of your way to say something like, I noticed you put that dish away without me asking. That makes me really happy, and really try to find at least 3 times a day to point out, I saw that you read that whole book. That's great. I was really proud of you, and sometimes the kids will roll their eyes and they'll be like, okay, but it's really nice for them to hear the feedback. And if you think about for yourself, how good it is at work to hear feedback from somebody, we always want that. We want positive feedback. Kids need that too. And I think when I meet with kids, they're often saying, all my parents do is tell me what I'm doing wrong. They didn't even notice that I cleaned my whole room, so I think we call it catching them doing good. So if you can catch them in the act of doing good every day, about 3 times a day, that just is a small, simple way to help boost confidence, self-esteem.
That's such a good point. As you're talking, I'm thinking, wow, you know what? I don't do that enough. Why is that though? Why do parents gravitate toward that? I don't know. Is there a reason why we tend to pick on the things that we see them doing wrong versus it's harder to catch them doing something right?
I just think we have this expectation that they're supposed to do certain things. And so if they did it, then they accomplished what they were supposed to do. And we don't go out of our way to say, that was a good job, or I'm proud of you. And kids really want our approval. Kids really, they want us to be proud of them. That's, one of their main goals growing up is, my dad was so proud of me for that. And, I think that if you go out of your way to just praise the little things, the other thing that's going to do is reinforce the behavior again. Like, my mom was so happy when I put that dish away. Tomorrow I'm going to put that dish away again because it made her happy. And it's just, one of those reinforcement strategies that takes very little effort. You just have to kind of remind yourself each day.
So even if they're rolling their eyes saying, all right, yeah, okay, Dad, yeah.
That's fine. It went in, they don't have to respond. It doesn't have to be a conversation. They know that you said it, it went in, and then that's it.
That's good. So that connects to self-esteem. So those little things help build somebody's, because I think sometimes I don't know, maybe I'm just speaking of myself, but I think of it as more complicated than that. I mean, getting a kid to really look at themselves and feel great about themselves. But that sounds like a pretty easy thing that we can do as parents that makes a pretty big difference. That's
Absolutely. Yeah. There are many ways to work on self-esteem, and obviously there are going to be kids who struggle a little bit more, and just praising them 3 times a day isn't going to solve, a major self-esteem issue. But, in thinking about ways that we could start out to change our own behavior as parents to try to lead them towards a better place with feeling more confident, I
yeah,
would say, another another way that our kids look at us is, as role models. They copy us from a very young age. We smile, they smile. That's instinctive at newborn.
yeah,
So, if you are inadvertently kind of exhibiting your own self-esteem issues in really small ways. So lots of kids that I see will say something like, well, my mom didn't like that picture, or my mom said she looked fat in that dress, or, little things that we just would do, randomly say like, oh, I don't like this, I got to change, or delete that picture, I don't like how I look. And, next thing you know, the kids are hearing from us like, how you look is important, this is how they role model and copy us. So it's really important in your day-to-day, just kind of role modeling, the little things you say that you don't even know if they're hearing you.
yeah.
They're seeing that. They're seeing that that's important to you, and so that should be important to them.
Oh, that's a great point. And again, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, okay, yeah, there's a lot of parents. I think we naturally do that. We tend to be self-critical, and the kids pick up on that even more so what we do and how we act than even anything.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So let me ask you another a tough one. You go through and your kids seem at different ages to be more receptive to your advice and guidance and leadership, if we're going to call it that. And then they reach a point sometimes, and I know a lot of parents deal with this. It's like, okay, if I tell my kid to go left, they're going to go right. If I tell them to do this, they're going to do the opposite. I mean, is that, number one, is that a pretty common thing? And how do you deal with that?
So that's extremely common. I would say every single day that I see kids, I hear one say, I was just about to do my homework, and then my mom came in and said, did you do your homework? And now I don't want to do it. Or, any kind of task. And it's almost that idea that kids, we're talking about teenagers now mostly, preteen teens are a little bit more kind of rebellious in that way. Like they want things to be their idea. They want it to come from them. And I think there are a lot of ways to really deal with this. One, knowing that they think they know better than us. And we, of course, think we know better than them. And the last thing kids want to hear is, I'm an adult, and when you're an adult, you'll understand. They want you to treat them like little adults. So I think that, obviously we can't just give them all the reins and let them make their own decisions, because their brains are not fully developed. They honestly don't make the best decisions. And it's not always their fault. Our brains aren't really fully developed till we're in our early 20s. So that part up here, the prefrontal, that's where our decision-making abilities lie. And so that's why you see high school, college students sometimes not making the best choices. And I think that parents expect kids to act like adults. Kids want to be treated like adults, but that's not really how it goes.
Yeah.
So I would say, in terms of figuring out how to manage this, one strategy, again, these are, just little tips and tricks. But one strategy that works really well is trying not to nag, trying not to say, did you do it? Have you done that homework? Where is it? Let me see it, constant, because that's what kind of makes these kids back off a little bit. I think is to just set your expectations clearly, like you would, in a job scenario. Like, I expect that paper to be done by 2, or give a deadline, I expect that paper to be done by this time. When it's done, I'd like to see it. And here you can do your phone, computer screen time after that. Really try to just have it be, these are my expectations, and not emotional, not, why haven't you done this? You never do what I tell you. This really kind of different, really just clear. These
Yeah.
are the expectations. These are the consequences.
Okay.
And
What about in that situation where, I mean, I think back, and you bring up another good point. Your brain is not fully developed. So even when you're 18, 19, you think like you are fully developed. I'm smart, I know, but your brain is still growing, right? Your decision making. I think back to decisions I was thinking of, or ideas that I had when I was 18 years old, and I look back now, I'm like, wow, that was the dumbest thing in the world. Thank God I didn't do that, or I had my parents guide me in the right direction. When you see your kid going down a direction that or making a bad decision that is wrong, or thinking through something that you really know is the wrong decision. How do you handle that?
Well, and I think kids want their feelings to be heard. They want their decisions to be heard by you. And I think what happens is, so for example, if recently this happened where a senior in high school said to their parents, I'm thinking college is not for me. I don't want to go to college. And the parents quickly said, like, that's absolutely not an option. You're out of your mind. You're going to college.
Right.
No, like, end of discussion. So what happens to the child in that situation? They get shut down. Their feelings are not acknowledged. Maybe it is a bad idea, but either way, he never even got to really express his idea about it. So
Yeah.
I think in what helps is, before you're quick to say, no, you're wrong, I'm right, I know more than you, take a step back and say, okay, it sounds like you're feeling like college is not for you. Let's have a conversation about, can you give me 3 or 4 bullet points about why you think that? What has led you to this decision? Like, give them, even if you're going to have a discussion about this and it's not the final answer, give them a chance to explain their point of view. And so you can understand, maybe it's something that you can fix. Maybe they'll say something like, well, really, I'm afraid I'm just going to do poorly, so why bother? That's something you can address, and then you can get them motivated to go to school or do something, make another choice. But until you know what's the underlying reasons why they don't want to go, you're
Yeah.
just shutting down the conversation by saying that what you want doesn't matter. What I say goes, and that's a good way to get them to pull back.
It's interesting because, and I had a topic on one of the recent podcasts about great leaders seek to understand, and that's what that is. And the value of that is, people. You're right. There might be some validity to their thoughts. You don't know why they're coming to that decision, or if you're leading an organization, you don't know why that employee is necessarily making those decisions or taking those actions. Maybe there was a reason why that person, a legitimate reason why they were late. I shouldn't assume that it was because they overslept. Maybe they got in an accident or something, or maybe they're thinking about making this change. And as a kid, maybe I'm thinking through this, and I might think the underlying reason is because they don't want to go to school because they're lazy, when in reality, or they want to, have some fun and travel, when in the reality, there might be something totally different. And if I ask the right questions, what you're saying is that'll come out sometimes, and might help me handle that a little bit differently.
Yeah, I mean, parents often tell me that one of parents' biggest complaints is their kids don't talk to them. Well, how do I get her to talk to me? How do I get them to talk to me? Well, if when your child talks to you, you don't agree with them, you're quick to shut them down. Why would they continue to talk to you, right? So if you're not receptive to hearing their point, even if you already know as you're listening to it that this is so not what you think and you totally disagree, that's okay. We disagree with adults all the time. We're allowed to disagree with our kids. We still can hear them out. And the more we hear them out and give them a space to feel like it's okay to tell us their opinions, even if we disagree, the more they're going to talk to us. If we're quick to shut down, they will shut down too. So,
Oh, that's interesting. So is there any kind of guideline, like as your kids start to get older and, go through different phases, how your type of leadership or influence should change, or your kind of role with them? Is there anything that would be a good kind of way to look at it as a parent?
I think I think this applies across the spectrum of, from toddler to, elementary age, school age child to middle school. The kids change and their situations change, and, they go through puberty and a lot happens, and the social situation is extremely challenging for these kids. It's very different from when we were young. Their whole cyber world is something that none of us have any experience with as children. So, I think that makes it really complicated too. It adds layers that we don't understand. I think that as kids get older, the key is pulling back. Obviously, younger kids need us to guide them. They need to know you're not supposed to put your hand on the stove, for example. We need to tell them that. We shouldn't need to tell a teenager, at this point, not to do something like that. Sometimes we go out of our way to make sure that we tell our teenagers, what to do and how to be careful. And I think they think, we already know this step. We already know this. You don't have to keep reminding us. And that gets frustrating, So I think pulling back a little bit as your kids get older is important. You don't want to totally, throw your hands up. They do need our guidance, but they don't need us micromanaging them at the same time.
Yeah.
So something I've seen that's pretty concerning actually over the past few years are some kids that have gone off to college, and come back and really struggled, not been able to successfully get through freshman year. And part of the struggle is, my mom would call my teachers when I'm, something happened, or I, was used to being able to turn in something late, or I, didn't know how to organize my schedule because my dad had always had my schedule in the Google Calendar. The ways that we seek to help our kids stay organized and, learn how to do things, they really need to learn how to do that on their own before they go off on their own, or else they end up really kind of floundering.
Falling flat. Yeah,
Yeah,
right. That's
yeah,
a good point. So, a parent can think that they're helping by being supportive and being there. And hey, you forgot your baseball uniform, and you got a game, and I'm bailing them out constantly. But that's not really developing self-sufficiency. They've got to really learn
yeah.
the hard way.
That's a great example with the uniform. So a story I wanted to tell you, and I think all parents can relate to this. A few years ago, I was in a meeting at the hospital. It was going to be a performance review, so it's a big meeting and kind of stressed out. And I get, my phone lights up and it's the school. And of course, all parents, they see the school call, they think their kid, cracked their head open, or so you answer. It's my daughter crying hysterically because she forgot her viola and there's orchestra today. And this is like the most horrific thing that could happen. Mom, how could you, it's Wednesday, how could you not have
Hmm.
brought my viola in the car this morning? So I'm freaking out now, like, oh my gosh, she's so distraught. She has orchestra, she doesn't have her viola, and I might have this meeting, and how am I going to get back all the way back to the school? We're both all, riling each other up to be so upset about something that really, in reality, she'll go to orchestra, she won't have her viola, she'll be fine. She'll get in trouble, maybe she'll get a little bit spoken to. She probably won't ever forget it again if she goes there and is embarrassed and wishes she had had it.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll remember on Wednesdays, oh, it's orchestra day, I don't want to have that happen to me again,
Yeah.
so I better bring my own viola. And I think when we are quick to bail our kids out, when we get so concerned about them feeling a little bit of embarrassment in that way, or them feeling a little bit of like disappointment, that's how they learn. We have to let them fall a little bit, or else they'll never know what that feels like.
Right. Well, and it's so funny you brought back a memory, because I remember as a kid, and I don't even remember how old I was. I was like young, and I was in the car, and my mom went into the store and she did something really nice. She came back out. She knew I loved these Charleston Chew candy bars. You remember those things that were like huge? And I liked it because it was like the biggest candy bar out there. And she surprised me. She came back in the car and she handed me like a strawberry Charleston Chew. And my reaction was, oh, wow, thanks, Mom. And I said, but didn't they have chocolate? And my mom was like, and she grabbed it from me. And I'm like, but no, Mom. And it upset me so bad. And she's like, you will never, I want you to remember this for the rest of your life. Somebody gives you something, you say thank you. You don't, that's the rudest thing to do. But she did it in a loving way. It hurt then, but I remembered it. Had she given it to me and let me keep it, I never would have remembered
Right.
that, and I wouldn't have learned that lesson. So, those things you remember them. The viola, she'll remember that, right? She won't.
Right, right. And and you have to understand that these little disappointments and these little, these are not major, not having your Chromebook for the day, while embarrassing and annoying and upsetting, it's not the end of the world. We don't have to rush to bring them these things, we need to let them get through it. How many times have you shown up at work and you forgot something important that you needed? Nobody's bringing it to you. When you're an adult, you have to learn how to figure these things out on your own. And until you have these experiences as a kid, you don't really know what that feels like. So I think we need to give our kids the experience of real world situations. Like someday there's going to be a time where if you forget to do something, there's going to be a consequence. Like you forget to pay a bill or you forget to lock the door, there's consequences to that. We
You know,
don't have to do it for them.
it's interesting because it comes from a good place. Like we want our kids, we don't want them to experience pain. We want their life to be better
Yes.
than ours. So we feel like the way to do that is to help them avoid any kind of pain.
Yeah,
But pain and discomfort is a part of growing, right? So that's,
absolutely.
you need to have that, and you need them to experience it. Otherwise they're never going to get, they're not only are they not going to have a better life, they're going to not even have the life you have as a parent.
That brings up a really good point about, trying to prevent your kids from feeling any kind of anxiety or any kind of discomfort, because I think what leads most to, and a lot of kids, you asked me earlier, about different ages, across all ages, what I see the most is anxiety. This generation of kids has so much anxiety. And I think part of the reason is because they get a lot of information in real time. And I think the other part is that, we try so hard to prevent our kids typically from feeling anxiety. So you don't want to go to that sleepover, you don't have to go. You don't want to, get that shot. Oh, well, you kind of have to, but we'll wait and we'll do it this way and we'll get you this cream and I'll get you a toy and, whatever we need to do to make it work for you. You don't want to try softball. Okay, you don't have to go. You don't like that idea. We won't do it. I think there's all these ways we kind of, in little small ways, we let our kids avoid the things that they're afraid of. And then they continue to be afraid because we don't want them to feel that. And in reality, when addressing anxiety, even as adults, the number one way to fight anxiety is to push towards it, right? Go to that softball game, go to that practice, try it one day, see how it feels, but you're going, and usually how many times have you done that and they loved it and they come out and they're like, it was great, but they didn't want to try. You kind of have to push them towards that. And I think that us trying to remove anxiety all of the time from our kids is really actually reinforcing more anxiety. Because
Yeah, it's hard. That's such a great point. So how do you know where that line is, though? Because, there's some kids that have legitimate panic attacks and really extreme anxiety. How do you know where that line is where you're pushing them in with a good, positive outcome into a, tough situation versus throwing them into the lion den and they get in a really bad place?
I think there is a tough line there. I think it's a matter of frequency and intensity. When you say the word panic attack, is it a couple tears and I don't really want to do this, but okay? Or is it like, headaches, vomiting, like, full blown, really struggling. I think that if it's at a point where you're like, I don't even know what to do, this is so intense, I don't know how to respond to this. I think that's when you talk to a doctor or a psychologist or a counselor and try to get some tips on how to kind of manage this or have your child manage this with coping skills. Because I think that, there is a line of where it's interfering with your everyday functioning. Like I can't get my kid to go to school. I can't get my kid to do things. Clearly, if you're at that point, you probably need a little more intervention. But if it's really just no, you know what, I don't think I want to go to that friend's house. Like, I don't know. And they're really kind of thinking through it. Don't be like, okay, it's okay. You don't have to go. I think it's better to just say, well, why don't you try? And then if you don't like it, I'll come get you, more in that way.
That makes sense. What about when your child comes to you at whatever age it might be and they have a problem? So you want your kids to be able to share that with you and talk to you about problems. What's the best way when your kid does open up to you with something? I don't know whether it's small or big. How do you handle that?
Well, so let me give you an example and see how you would respond. Okay.
Okay.
So, all right. So you're a parent and your child comes home, let's say middle school age. Daughter comes home and says, so today, and it's hysterical, crying off the bus, or in the car, tears. And you're like, oh my gosh, what happened? What's wrong? And they don't really want to talk about it. And you're like, no, it's okay. You can talk to me. Tell me what's wrong. And she says, all my friends at my lunch table told me today I couldn't sit with them anymore. This is very common, happens all the time. These are my really good friends. I've known them forever. Today, they made a circle around the lunch table. There was no other seat available. And I had to go eat in the library by myself. And it was so embarrassing. What would be, as a parent, your first response to that?
I think
there's no wrong answer.
Yeah, well, if there is, I'll give it, I'm sure. I guess I would say, I'm so sorry to hear that and that you went through that. I can't imagine that must have been so difficult. Is that happened before? Is this the first time? And, has it happened with other people? Do you feel like it's just you? Because I know when I was a kid, that happened to me. And sometimes it's just the direction of the wind or whatever, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah. I think that, so what you started with was great, which was acknowledging the feeling. Because what some parents would do, and what I even might do, because, in thinking about my own child, you get this instinctive as a parent, like, how dare they, how dare these kids do that to my kid, who are these kids? What's their parents' phone now? I'm calling, right.
Sure,
yeah, exactly. And what we often forget to do, because we hear this and then most of us are already like at the solution part, like, how do we fix this? I think my first instinct would be to say, like, well, what other friends can you sit with? Like solving the problem, right? Making it better. But what we often forget to do is acknowledge the feeling, which you did, which was good, which is just to say, wow, that's really embarrassing, or, oh, that's really sad.
Mm,
Or, even less than that, just like, ugh, you don't even have to say a lot. In fact, the less you say, the better.
mm,
And so you started with feeling, which is great. And then you asked a lot of questions. I might actually pull back and just listen and not ask any questions and just kind of use one word responses like, oh. And then when you say less, whoever you're talking to will say more. So if you start talking and I'm like, oh, you're going to keep talking because I'm not asking you a question that's, towards my point where I want to get at who are they, how has this ever happened before? What do you think you might do?
mm.
Just really like interesting, really one word, wow. And then they just keep talking. So the less we say, the more they say. And also it shows that we're really interested and we're listening and we're not trying to just get our point across because they're waiting. They're ready for us to be like, this is what I think you should do this. And then they're going to say, that's a stupid idea. You don't understand anything, and walk
Yeah.
away.
Wow,
So
that's so good because I'm thinking like, a lot of times our reaction is we want to solve the problem. And it's like, okay, I
absolutely.
know the answer. Here's what you got to do. Here's what you got to do. This. But that's not the right way to do it. Right. And that's what, we jump
Well,
to.
and I think our experience as adults suggests that we we want to say, when you're our age, you won't care about this. You won't care about people you went to high school with. And we know that, these things go away. But for those kids, their social world currently, that is their only world. They don't understand that that's going to get bigger and that these friends that they have in seventh, eighth, ninth grade might not all be their friends when they're 20, 30, 40 years old. But that doesn't matter to them right now.
Yeah.
That's who their friends are now. They don't have a bigger world to go off into. So it's, that even though we're like, oh my gosh, stupid middle school drama, that is their world. So we need to kind of go with them there, get into their world. But I think letting them talk, letting them say, well, oftentimes lead them to their own solution.
Mm.
So instead of saying, do you think maybe you should sit with another table, which is what I would want to say, right? I might say, what are you going to do tomorrow? Just let them, and
Oh,
then if they say, I don't know, what do you think I should do, then I can offer my opinion, right? But
mm,
the key is too, we're trying to help them solve their problems on their own, and so they can go off on their own as adults and solve problems and know, like, okay, here are a couple options, which one is the best.
great.
And if you feel like their option or their solution is really bad, like, well, I think I'll just go beat them up tomorrow. You might say something like, I can understand why you would feel that way. What might be some other options that you could consider? Really, but still, you're not giving yours
Mm.
unless you want to do it in a way that's okay. Here are your options. Here's something else you can think of. Which one of these between mine and yours and all these options might be the best one? So, and that's how we as adults solve problems, right? We
Yeah.
come up with our own solutions. We ask our friends or family for their advice. We might consult with somebody professionally, like, what do you think I should do? And then we take all of those and we pick the one that works for us.
Wow, that's interesting because I connect that to leaders. I work with a lot of leaders that struggle with that. They're not good at getting their teams to think creatively about problem solving, and part of it is because they give all the answers, they have all the solutions, and they don't let their team think. So it's
Right.
interesting as a parent how that might, or maybe even as a kid, maybe your parents were like that with you, and that develops you to be that way with your kids and be that way in the business world or in society too. There's a big
Right.
connection here. Yeah.
I mean, end of the day, we don't need to fix everything. We just need to listen.
Yeah.
And the more we listen, the more you listen without talking, the more your child's voice will be heard. Because if the more you talk, the less chance someone else has to talk. So it works in all sorts of relationships, a partnership, a business, parenting. The more you speak over somebody or the more you kind of put in your own voice, the less room there is for theirs. So if you're wondering why someone's not talking to you, sometimes you just need to start listening and stop talking yourself.
Somebody told me a long time ago, I don't know where I heard it, but you have one mouth and two ears, use them in that proportion.
Right.
I'm like,
It's
okay,
a good
that's
one.
actually really good advice. It's far too many people that just want to do all the talking. So let me ask you, and some people may be listening or watching this at some future date, and we're right now in the middle of the pandemic or hopefully toward the end, knock on wood, but we've been in quarantine here for the last 3 months. School's been canceled. I mean, and high school seniors and college seniors are now going without their graduation or their true experiences. It's life changing.
Yeah.
as a parent, I mean, how is there anything, any advice that you'd give to parents with, you know, we ourselves are going through so much change and adapting to different things and stress and anxiety. What can we do with regard to our kids going through this and how to help them
Mhm.
through this unbelievably unique time?
This has been by far the most unique and stressful time, I think. I mean, in terms of for adults, especially, like we've never experienced this in our lifetime, and kids look to us. Well, what did you do when this happened to you as a kid? And it didn't. So I think, like you said, we're adjusting, and we don't have any precedents for how to manage this.
Mhm.
I think some kids have gone through it. As where we live, it's been pretty much 100 days of not really being able to go places. So it's a long time, and I think some kids have dealt with it really well. Like maybe they hated school and this has been a dream for them and they're happy because they didn't have to go to school anymore. Some kids have really fallen apart and really, really struggled without that structure, the social aspects, and have really had a hard time. I think the take home message of this experience, though, has been resiliency. Like these kids have really done an amazing job for the most part, even if they're struggling with adapting to a situation that we have no experience with and have no certainty about. And think about, I think we forget how hard that is. And we know how hard it is for us, but how hard that is for them. Like they wake up and it's another day of like, well, there's this virus and we don't know what's happening. How scary is that? That's,
Mhm.
if I told you, so, this started around March where we live. And if I had told you in January, hey, just so you know, in March, like the whole world's going to shut down. There's going to be a pandemic. School's going to close for the rest of the year. You're not going to be allowed to see your friends. We might not even be able to get food. This is what was happening, right, in March. So if I told you that in January, you would freak out and your kids would freak out and you would be like, how are we going to deal with that? What do we do? And everyone would panic. Um, the fact is, even though it's been extremely hard and challenging, we did handle it. Maybe not always the best way. Maybe some days were terrible. Maybe some parents threw their hands up and just let their kids play video games all day. And you know what? At the end of the day, is that really going to impact them down the road? Probably not. The fact that they got up every day and survived what has been probably the hardest situation we've faced in our lifetime, certainly theirs,
Yeah.
as a on a world level, on a macro level, um, that's pretty impressive. So I think taking a step back and thinking about how awesome it is that they have gotten up every day and lived through this and how much resiliency this is going to build for them so that when they're older, they can remember this time and say, you know what, when something hard actually happened, I handled it. I dealt with it. I got through it because usually it's the anticipation of something
Yeah,
that's
that's
scary.
makes you stronger. It's interesting, and I've seen people, and this is not just kids, but I mean adults and in every aspect of life. It seems like this situation, and I think of anything in general, when you apply stress, it exposes the cracks, and it's a stress test, and it either breaks or it makes you stronger. And I've seen a lot of people come out of this stronger versions of themselves,
Mhm.
and better versions of themselves. They would say, just because it's puts them in different directions. Maybe they took on a new hobby or something that they've always wanted to do that now they don't have an excuse not to do, or they had extra time that allowed them to do that. Or maybe they've invested in coaching, or they've studied something or taken a class that they wouldn't have taken before to develop themselves. And that's pretty fascinating. Like that, where people have used this as a time to really grow and get better, and then other people
Mhm.
have not. It seems like they've moved in a direction of kind of uh, you know almost just inability to move, almost paralysis. uh,
Yeah.
is there any way you can get, I mean, when you're working with kids, or maybe my question is, does it start with you? Is it being that good example, to your point before, with your kids, to show them, hey, here's how you can do something positive in a really tough time? is
Mhm.
is that more the way to do it versus trying to push them to do it?
I mean, I think it's a balance of both, right? I mean, I think when this started, there were some people that, some parents that like drew up their homeschool schedule, like from 8 to 8:30, you're going to do math, and really tried to organize and also work. Because a lot of us became homeschool teachers and are employed, so we had to do our jobs from home and take care of our kids at the same time, which is typically not how it goes. So I think a lot of people, got this idea that they have to do all these things, and now they have time to exercise, and now they have time to cook homemade meals and get really, like you said, do all these hobbies or things that they never had time to do for. I think other parents felt that pressure at some points and were like, I just lucky that my kids like got their schoolwork in while I had 7 conference calls and like the house didn't burn down, right? So I think it really depends. I think that both cases are okay. I feel like it's okay to not have put a lot of pressure on yourself to be perfect and do all these great things during a time that is completely imperfect and hard. So I think that yes, it's awesome, if you came out of this using that as an opportunity. It's also okay if you just came out of this just above water, because this was hard. And so I just feel like, in terms of role modeling for your children, transparency is key, right? Like if you're having a hard day and you're juggling things, think about how hard it is for them. They can't see their friends either. They're not in their routine. They're doing their homework from home. They haven't seen their teachers. They can't ask questions. It's very different.
Mhm.
So I think it helps us take a step back and say, you know what? It's been really hard for me to work from home and do all of these things. I can imagine it's been really hard for you to go to school from home and not see your friends. And I think sometimes what we do is just expect them to adapt because they have no choice, without acknowledging that this has been hard for them too. So again, kind of like how we started this conversation with the noticing and the praising, noticing and kind of commenting like, or asking like, how has this been for you? What's it been like for you to not go to school? What's it like to not see your friends? I think just conversing about it, being open about it is the way you kind of make it more positive. And it's okay if not every day is great.
That,
It's a bad time.
yeah, that's great. And I think, a lot of kids love snow days or when school is canceled, and then all of a sudden it gets canceled for a long time. They kind of dreamt about, wow, wouldn't that be cool if school was canceled for an extended
Mhm.
period of time? And then it is, and they realize how much they miss it in reality, and the camaraderie and the socializing and even the structure and the studying and everything like that.
Yeah,
Um,
routine is what we all benefit from routine and kind of going through having a structure and a schedule. Too much time to think just creates a lot of free floating anxiety. And now your brain is spiraling into all these thoughts that normally you wouldn't have time to think about because it's time to go to math or time to go to soccer, so you don't have time to sit and wonder, all of the things that go through your head with too much time.
Yeah, but something you said makes stuck out of my mind, and that's sometimes it's okay to tell somebody, listen, just making it through it is good. I mean, it's
Mhm.
not, you don't have to put the pressure on and the super high expectations. This is a tough time, and to come out of it with your head above water is progress and positive. That in and of itself is accomplishment. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we're all so stressed and our kids are so stressed. And it's like, I mean, there were a lot of kids I saw that said, now my mom's making me do this extra SAT class because I have all this time, and it's sometimes you don't have to pack on all the pressure. Sometimes it's okay to take a step back and it's okay to just, all of these things will get done. They'll all happen. But I think that the more we kind of push like to make it better, make it better, make it better, we're not even acknowledging how great it is right now, right? Like
mhm,
maybe our kids needed a break, maybe it's good that we spent time at home, and maybe it's good that we all got to see what it was like to work in a different manner. Maybe some of us are going to come out of this knowing that we can do our jobs in a different way, or that we can parent in a different way, or maybe we've seen our kids so many more hours a day that we're understanding them we're seeing things that we didn't notice before because they go to school all day and then they go to sports and then they have their friends and we never see them.
right.
So this could all end up having been a really positive experience, with a very negative framework, obviously. But I think there's ways to take positives out of it without having to be like, here's 7 hobbies you should try. Um,
Right.
but I do think having things to do is important. I think being too bored does cause anxiety. So
Yeah.
there's a line there.
Yeah, and I know we're running kind of close to the end here, and I've got so many things I want to ask you about. But what about, I know a lot of people, and me included, have been in situations and times where we've really recognized the need to be more present. And our minds are always going, we're always thinking about the future, or we're thinking about the past. And especially when it comes to being with kids. Um, what are your thoughts and perspective on that? I mean, how can
Mhm.
somebody learn to, whether it's yourself or even working with, helping your kids be more present?
I'm really into kind of being planful and thoughtful and methodical about these kinds of things. So I would actually schedule time each week, or at what fits in your life and their lives, to do screen free, phone free. We're going to do something without our phones, and that's it. And that's that scheduled time, so you know that you're not going to be playing your video games during that time. We're not doing other things, and it's really part of your routine to once a week, even maybe more, but at least once a week have a no screens. We're not going to watch a movie. We're going to go for a walk maybe, or we're going to sit down and have a meal, and or it could be your nightly dinners that you talk about things. But I think making the time, and then when you're at your dinner, you're not doing your own emails, because I think that they look to us too, and we're always busy and we're working, and especially now, like you had mentioned with the pandemic, we're working a lot more because we're home, and so we're on the screens a lot. I think that making this separate time, and it's established, and they know it's coming, and it's important, and I think that it's really about making the effort to be present.
What's interesting is I started with my kids, when we go out to eat, we leave our phones in the car, and that has been like total game changer.
Hmm.
And the conversations and the laughter and everything, it's just such an incredible time. So I think you're absolutely right. There's just such this natural tendency to look at our phones, even if we don't look at them, but we bring them and we have them and they're on the table, or they're in our pocket or whatever. We're tempted to look at them, and then we're giving our kids the message that, hey, you don't go anywhere without your phone, or you don't have a conversation with somebody without your phone sitting on the table. And that life in the phone is as important or more important than what's going on right here. It's kind of crazy.
Well, and it's also distracting, because if you're trying to fully engage in what your kids are going through, and then you're getting an email from a client that is distressed, now you're stressed out. That when you get home, you're going to have to write a report real fast or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You can't really be engaged in your dinner now because your brain is already at the next thing. So,
Right, exactly. Wow, good stuff. Well, I know we're at the end of our time here, but what are any final thoughts that you would share with people, whether it's just parenting advice or life advice? What do you have?
I think obviously there are a lot of topics we could talk about. I think one that I, hear a lot is just really about kids feeling like they're just constantly blamed for everything. Everything's their fault. And, going back to our self-esteem conversation, I think there are ways to express disappointment and when kids don't do the things you want them to do without shaming and blaming.
Mhm.
So, instead of saying like, look what you did, or you always do this, or I keep having to tell you, and, these sayings that we say all the time, and we don't mean to be malicious, but the kids are hearing it like, this is hurting me. I don't like how this is coming out. Really just kind of guiding and leading, like you said. So for example, if your child didn't put away the milk after they made their own cereal, and then it's ruined, right? Now they can't have cereal. Instead of saying something like, look what you did, now you can't do this, you can say something like, hey, it's a good idea to put that milk back right after you pour your cereal so you don't forget next time.
Mm.
You're giving the same message, you're teaching them something without making them feel terrible about it, because making them feel terrible doesn't make them necessarily change the behavior.
Mm.
So, that's just a quick example, a little example of just ways throughout the day that we're kind of inadvertently blaming and shaming throughout the day. So I think just trying to be more, just take a step back and be less emotional. Really just less emotion, more listening, less talking, less blaming.
Wow, there's a lot of things that I think people don't even realize that they're doing, and you're almost, it's like you're unconsciously incompetent with something. You don't know what you're doing wrong, and then all of a sudden, as I'm listening, I'm like, wow, yeah, okay, God, so that makes sense. And I could have you on once a week here. We probably.
But I do want to make the point, to be transparent, that, don't blame yourself too much if you do these things, because nobody teaches us, right? Nobody tells us, hey, you probably shouldn't talk like that. And sometimes these things come out as parents, maybe they're things we heard as kids, or maybe, we didn't mean them to come out that way. I talk to parents about these things all the time. I don't necessarily always do the right thing in my own parenting. Sometimes I'm emotional or I'm upset and I say the wrong thing. I mean, we all do that. So I think it's really important for parents too, when they're reading parenting books or talking to people like me. I always say right up front, listen, this is hard. You don't always think before you speak. We don't always know the right thing to say. There are opportunities, though, to admit when you didn't do the right thing. And I think that's also part of growth and modeling, right? So if you know you yelled at your kid and you were hard on them and they didn't really need that and that wasn't helpful, it's okay to say hours later or days later or months later, hey, remember that time I yelled at you really, really loudly for this thing? That really wasn't the right way for me to handle that situation. I feel badly about that. Like
Mm,
how great would that feel, right? You know, for both you and your child. So I think you know, a big part of my parenting advice is just be less hard on yourself. So when you said incompetent and things that you've said before, you know, we've all done that. We're no one's perfect. So
that's great advice. I'm going to block off a good couple hours and go through all this stuff. Hey, remember that time? Okay. And number 17, remember that day on February 28th? I said something really stupid. So, um, well, this has been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate this. If people want to learn more, they want to connect with you, they want to maybe get help with, from you and work with you, how do they get a hold of you?
So my website is probably the best way to reach me. It's drlorifishman.com. And yeah, I mean, I do a lot, or currently I'm doing a lot of virtual consultation because my office is closed still from the pandemic, which has been great because I've actually been able to meet parents from all other different kinds of places. So it's been really fun for me. But yeah,
Awesome. Well, this has been absolutely fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on, and maybe at some point down the road, we'll have you back on and talk about what we didn't get to.
thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Lots of stuff. Well, this has been Dr. Lori Fishman, attending psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital, clinical instructor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and an expert on child and adolescent mental health and parenting skills. Very valuable. Greatly appreciate all your watching our episodes, your likes, your comments, sharing. Keep them coming. Keep your ideas and keep leading on. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Have a great one.